Welcome to Live, Laugh, Loads, a fun podcast for gay men exploring authenticity and vulnerability.
Where we talk about gay culture, mental health, relationships, and sex. Come take a load off with me, Ryan.
And me, Dario. So sit back, strap in, and enjoy the ride.
Can you hear me? And on my fidgety?
Hi, Ryan.
Hello. Literally my thirst. Oh, let me just talk about. Are we recording? Or is this official?
We're recording.
All right, we're doing it again. Welcome to episode 2, everybody.
Episode 2.
It's been a while since we recorded. We've been editing and creating graphic content for like over a month now.
Yeah, and we had that episode that was really, really long.
No, we had to divide into 2 for all of you. We'll try not to do that to you again today.
Yeah, but it was fun. And I want to say that we have 75 listens, 50 on Spotify. We hit that yesterday, which feels like a milestone. And I know it's small, but like it makes me really happy.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening in, and to all of our loved ones for all of the feedback that you gave us throughout this process.
And then, yeah, the feedback and the comments. We got some really cute comments. Every morning I get a new comment. I screenshot it. I send it to Ryan. I'm literally in tears with every single one of the comments.
Every single piece of like genuine feedback or commentary that we get, Dario follows by with, "I'm in tears. I'm crying. I'm literally crying."
I'm a crybaby. So it doesn't take me much to cry, but it's yeah, it's just really humbling. And I think we said it on the first episode that we just essentially wanted to create something for the community, for the gay people, and we just received so much love. And
Yeah, specifically, we had some people make some like specific comments that it felt like what we were shooting for landed exactly kind of how we wanted it to, which was really nice.
yeah, the vulnerability that is genuine, that is deep, that is relatable. Uh, and it's not like we're trying to make it that way. We're just being, and I think that that's what I think it's happening. And so, really meaningful. Keep them coming. I'm gonna keep crying, and and it just gives us fuel to keep doing it. So we have some corrections before we jump into episode 2. One of the things that I wanted to say, I wanted to give the opportunity.
So one of the most common pieces of feedback that we got from all of our friends was my pronunciation of Dario's name as
Yeah.
Dario.
And to be fair, I don't introduce myself in Spanish, which I should. So in Spanish, it will be Dario. But I know that that's really difficult to remember for most people.
Well, and specifically because I grew up with a friend named Dario, and that's how you pronounced his
Yeah.
name. So like from the age of like
You
10 to
did.
like 18.
That is random. Like, what? How come I didn't know this?
What, that his name was
Yeah.
Dario?
It was it spelled the same way?
Yeah, spelled exactly the same way.
Where was he from?
The Midwest.
Okay.
Hmm.
I feel like he had other
He was
roots.
white and from America.
That is very strange. That is not even a common name in Argentina.
No, definitely super not common.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's probably the only. I think you would be the only second one that I've ever
Yeah.
can clock as meeting.
Yeah. Well, so my name is Dario. I do say Dario. And I think we can help Ryan
It's gonna take
curb it.
Yeah.
From Dario.
Dario.
So, one correction. The other one we're reading here. Oh, so I gave shit to Ryan about his cough last time, and then
and potentially drinking noises.
drinking noises, which apparently do not show up in sound after we edit it. So
Yeah, so when you this will be the first time hopefully you guys are all seeing video of our session today, so you can see us with our fun little our setups. What we hear is
everything.
everything magnified. It's very ASMR happening
Yeah.
for us the entire episode, and then so we just first time around didn't
I
realize that all of it wouldn't translate onto the actual recording.
I can hear the hairs on his mustache when he speaks.
That's so weird.
So sorry, Ryan, for giving you shit
No,
about
it's
this.
cool. I was trying to do a little ASMR with my mustache.
And then um
Well, this one's mine. Yeah. So I just minor fact checking myself. I misspoke. I believe I said that my brother was 30 years older than me during the last session. To clarify, I have one full sister who is 3 years older than me, one half sister who is 10 years older than me, and a half estranged brother who is 20 years older than me.
cool. Well, those were all the corrections we had.
Yeah.
Um, thank you again, everybody, for listening to episode one, part two. And so, episode two, it's all about therapy, and we named it Shrink Me Baby
One
One More
more time.
Time.
I was talking to people about the podcast yesterday. I was like, I'll tell you the topic, but I won't tell you the name because the name is so good.
Yeah, so before we jumped in, um, do we want to do content disclosure for this episode? Um, and yeah, so the content disclosure is we are going to talk about our upbringing. We're going to talk about uh, heavy topics: sexual assault, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, drug use, possibly more. We might we might add another
Yeah, there will be.
line depending on what topics we actually cover. But it will be a heavy episode. We're gonna try to keep it light, but also because we're talking about therapy and how that helped us. Um, we need to give you context.
Yeah, we'll do a full content disclosure in the description for the episode if there's anything else that comes up that we didn't already
Yeah,
just mention there.
yeah. But before we jump in, let's do the thirst traps of the week.
We'll have a little fun moment before we
We'd
get
like
into
to.
the deep and heavy. So I actually have to my guy changed his handle.
Oh, okay.
That's still his Twitter and or X handle is still toxic717, but now his Instagram handle is Noah-717.
Oh, okay. Both ways.
Oh my God, this beautiful. If you don't follow him, he's this beautiful European. I don't know exactly.
Russian, Eastern
I'm not gonna make any
Yeah,
estimate. I'm just gonna say
we don't know.
European.
He's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. He does these like really his like trademark videos are just like him shirtless with his like extremely defined titties
And a
and he these
beautiful
beautiful
wig. The
tattoos.
wig
Yeah, we both have
tattoos.
the wing tattoo in common. And he just and his glasses with his like parted hair. Oh, it's so cute. And he just gives you like
He has a
very
very deep voice.
yeah, and he does these like very
His voice just like vibrates like all through your heart and other parts, and it's just like
it's
yes.
beautiful. And then he does these like little just kind of like emotional, mature, emotional I don't even know how to describe it. He just has these like kind of like little TED Talk moments where he like walks through like
Yeah.
emotional maturity and self-reflection and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's like stimulates my brain and my body.
Yeah. Yeah, he's gorgeous. He just keeps like trying to go to sleep, so we might need to plug that wire behind you.
Let me know if and when you want me to grab a wire.
So my thirst trap of the week, his handle on Instagram is name.is.joao, Joao. And similar to Noah, he also does advice. I think he might be straight. I don't know if he's straight or not, but he's always like talking about like how girls need to respect themselves. But I don't. He's not giving me like vibe. But I don't know. I don't know anything about him. Just that he also has a beautiful voice, beautiful eyes, very tan skin, and uh the emotional maturity as well as the part of it. Like it seems like every time that we do a thirst trap, it's really not a thirst trap. It's like beauty pair
Beauty paired with emotional
with
intelligence.
emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
That's our type,
that shit is
obviously. Yeah, it's the new black.
yeah.
Emotional
Emotional
maturity
maturity is
the
the new black. Yeah, that's the gay version of the show that'll come out.
Yeah. So okay, well, that's that. And I don't know if you saw episode one, but we've been posting our thirst trap and our handles on our Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. You'll get the handles, and I made a highlight reel for all of them, so you can go and find them and thirst with us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next part is you starting.
Yeah, so we're gonna start off by kind of like walking through our both of our initial experiences with therapy. So I think I touched on mine a little bit during the coming out episode. So just to like reiterate, I first started out in therapy when I was in eighth grade because I had got diagnosed with ADHD and got prescribed Adderall. And part of like back then, it was just like an extremely controlled substance.
Mhm.
So I had to go through, I
What
can't
were
remember.
the symptoms?
My grades just started slipping. I couldn't focus at all. My parents were like I always needed to like be doing something with my hands and things like that. I mean, it was a phenomenal like there was such a drastic difference in my ability to like focus and like get good grades and stay present in class. I honestly couldn't it's like I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, I don't even remember like how I got there. Like I don't remember like who gave me the diagnosis really or like who even initiated the prescription for it. Like I don't remember much about that.
Mm.
I just remember getting the prescription, starting on it, all of a sudden doing way better in school and then having to go for these like regular evaluations
Okay.
to I guess check for negative side effects or something. I do
Mm.
remember part of it was also getting physicals done. And I'd obviously Adderall probably mixed with puberty at the same time, but like I just like started dropping weight like
Oof.
crazy. So there was definitely a little bit of period where they didn't think that they were going to keep me on it because
So
I
this was like what age?
eighth into ninth grade, so 13, 14. I
Okay.
went like when I was in eighth grade, I remember I was like my highest recorded weight was like 170 some pounds. And then I
Mm.
think probably by the end of ninth grade, I was probably in the like 120s, 130s.
Mm.
So it was a pretty drastic drop. And then after I came out, my therapy transitioned into like a little bit more typical one on one psychotherapy. Um, and then I also started doing like youth group at the same, like a youth group therapy thing. I can't remember how frequently, maybe like once a month or something like that, which I really, really enjoyed. That was really cool. I think I enjoyed that more than the psychotherapy. I don't even, it's like I remember my therapist, but I don't like remember what we were even talking about in that room at the time.
What was the experience with the group though? Were your age and were they guided?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that, yeah, yeah, guided. There was like my one-on-one therapist was always there in the room with us. All high school age group. I think I was the youngest one there usually. And uh, it was actually my first time that I smoked weed was right after group therapy. So it was like therapy was like it was like at like a house that was renovated into an office, and there was like a back upper patio, and it was like me and two of the girls were hanging out after group therapy and one of the girls went to go like pull a cigarette out of her purse or something to smoke a cigarette and realized that she had like a packed bowl in her purse and she's like, oh, we should all smoke a little weed. And I was like, oh, well, I've never done that before. And then she's like, oh, then when we have to. And then I remember like we took a couple hits and then immediately after my dad showed up to pick me up, and so like I had to get in the truck with my dad to drive home, so I was like super paranoid. And I specifically even remember like we were listening to music and he just like stops the music and goes, Ryan, I need to ask you a question. And I'm like,
That was your dad.
yeah. I'm like, what? And he's like, do you want to have Chinese food for dinner tonight? And I was just like, yeah, I do.
Did he know that you were high?
I doubt it, but maybe. I mean, there's definitely a possibility that I smelled like weed. But what I didn't know at the time was that my mom was a
The
pretty a
pothead.
pothead. So I mean, it's like it's one of those things. He had to have known.
Yeah.
Like I just don't. It's just would be shocking to me that he didn't know because I probably smelled like it. If there
Yeah.
were any, it was my first time,
Oh my God.
so
I can smell people's like cigarette. Yeah,
that's what I
like
mean. It's exact. I
for
like we were
sure.
just smoking,
Yeah.
like so.
That's funny. That seems like it was like a little nod of like, I know what you did and I'm just gonna get you the food because you probably have the munchies.
Yeah. Well, and it was also my mom was probably away because my mom hated Chinese food, so whenever my mom would like go away to do something for work, it would be like the first thing that we would do would be we'd order
Right.
Chinese food because my mom would never want it for takeout.
Mm, yeah.
So my first experiences with therapy are pretty lighthearted.
Yeah. But you were pretty old, so like 13. I think like for me that started way sooner.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I remember, yeah, again, you touched on it a little bit.
I think that the first time I went to, since you're over there, grab the charger before our.
What charger?
There's like
Oh
a
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, here I'm gonna have to detach for a
Okay.
second.
So for me, like I started when I was in um fourth grade, which was probably um 12. No, that seems like a little bit old. I think it was 9 years old, and the teacher was observing me. My fourth grade teacher, I can't remember her name, but I hated her. She observed me like playing with girls in recess, and so instead of playing with the boys and playing, the the rough, sports and soccer, they were always kicking some shit, it's Argentina, so like that's all they do, boys.
You
Kicking
just
some
kick
stuff.
shit around.
Yeah. And I will go to where the girls were and I will ask to use their Barbies or their dolls. And so obviously they clock me as, something was wrong with me, because I was, attracted to more of the female things. And uh, I didn't like sports. I loved crafts. I was a really good painter, and everything that was like building things with my hands, I always absolutely loved. Very creative. But apparently, that obviously in a very patriarchal society like it's Latin America, was not seen as correct. So they sent me to the psychiatrist, and all I remember from that session, it was only one session, um, and my mom was very concerned about it. This is one thing I remember. Um, and they made me draw a house. And so I drew a house, and the house, everybody was happy, and there was like smoke coming out of the house, and there was like a little sun, and the sun had a face, and, like I put a smile on the sun. So apparently that meant happy childhood to, that's how they assessed it. Um,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
so that was the first time, and then there were like two other incidents that I had also around the same age. I got in trouble because, well, I got in trouble twice. Um, Once was because at home, it was very normal for my family to pat each other in the butt as like you were walking by them. But nobody really explained to this 9-year old that that's not something normal that you do with people outside of your
People
household.
that you don't know.
Yeah. It's like
It's
I was
not a
like
handshake.
exactly, but but I was like literally going through school,
It's like
just patting
random people in the
everybody.
grocery store. Boop.
And this, like this is like at the private school that I was in, and um, so that was, that got me in trouble, and then that kind of escalated to like, um, just being like, like just not knowing how to like interact with humans. And so they, instead of like educating me again, they started separating me from the groups. And so like we had this bus, like the bus that comes and pick you up at your house. And so they wouldn't let me sit with the kids. They put me in front with the driver, separated from everybody else. It was pretty awful. Like now that I think about it.
This kid is struggling to socialize with children. Let's remove the social opportunities for a time period. That'll help. I have a quick sidebar question. Was the first psychiatrist that you saw, was that like
In school.
in school? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so like a school counselor.
Yeah, it's like a school
Okay.
counselor. Um, and so anyhow, so this kind of led to like me rebelling and not wanting to be there because I felt so different, right? And so like I remember one day, like I just was like, I'm not gonna sit in the front with you. I'm just gonna go sit with the kids in the back, And I went, and none of the kids like let me sit with them. And so I end up biting a girl in her hand, like her like wrist, like just totally savage, like a fucking savage.
Is there more context? Do you remember more context
I
about
don't
what led up to the bug
remember.
bite?
I don't remember how it escalated to the biting, but I never like in any fights that I remember having as a child, I will never punch someone. I would just go for like a bite.
So you're a move. Okay.
Like,
I'm a slapper, so
no, I was like definitely like I would just go like a fucking dog and like attack people in my mouth.
what an instinct.
That was my instinct growing up. And so that also got me in trouble to the point that like then they had like the parent teacher, conferences that they do. And everybody apparently this is the story that I hear from my mom. Everybody was complaining about Dario this, Dario that. He did this to my daughter, he did this to my kid. He did that to
She's like, so we have a list of formal complaints, and she
yeah.
pulls out like a binder.
But the funny thing is, like, nobody knew who my mom was. My mom was sitting in this meeting, quiet, listening to everything, and my name dropping every 5 minutes. And finally, like, she gets up and is like, just want to say something. I'm Dario's mom.
It's been a
Anyway,
grueling hour sitting
yeah.
here.
Yeah. And so, anyhow, so that was pretty much my only, like, obviously there was way more stuff that was gonna happening at home. And I think like that as an adult, when I look back to all of that, I feel like, you know, a lot of the issues that I was having as a child were being caused by what was happening at home, right? Um
I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
and so like obviously I was not a normal kid growing up, but I didn't know that it was a normal because you don't have any context as a child. I do remember some things that were a little bit off, um and those being, so I don't know how this happened. I should probably check with my dad, but I think like one of his friends from high school was part of the board at this private school that me and my sister got scholarships, like full scholarships to go to. But we grew up very poor. We grew up in the ghetto in Argentina, and like a tiny little house that I think my dad built from scratch with, bricks and, metal sheets, like it was not glorious or glamorous at all. Um, we lived and across from two fields. One was like a wheat field, and the other one was like a farm, and all around us was just like literally like your typical ghetto neighborhood with like just very poor, no affluence at all. Everything was very rural almost. um and imagine that. Imagine my parents barely surviving. My dad was a blue collar worker. He had a grocery store. At the time, he had literally so many jobs. I mean, one thing I will say about my dad is that he always was a very hard worker. Um, and so the I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about how you, I think, got to private school?
Oh yeah, and so
Somebody's friend, like your
so
dad's
anyhow,
friend is on
so
the
yeah,
board.
so we had no money, but we got into this private school with very affluent kids. So that alone was also like very dystopian for me, because now when I look back, I remember knowing that I didn't fit in. I remember wanting to have the latest shoes that everybody was wearing, or even our uniform. We had this really fancy uniform that my parents couldn't afford. And so what they end up doing was making them with a tailor. So my uniform looked
Like
like
slightly different.
cheaply made versus the ones that were like mass produced and sold by,
You,
whatever.
you would think a full scholarship
It will
would
include that. I
come.
don't think it did. No. This is Argentina. Like I don't think it will play into that. But yeah, I didn't have the right uniform, or
Yeah,
like sometimes we had, I remember like at some point they changed it, and we had like this light blue, like those color shirts,
like a
whatever,
polo.
like polos. Yeah. And so mine had like this like stamp, Iron In logo. You know, it was a patch where like everybody else was like printed embroider, you know, and it was just like, and you could tell it was like, oh, this was like homemade versus like this is not, you know, and so there was a lot of things like that. Not to complain, I think like obviously my parents wanted to give me a good education, but there were like just this little things there that like just made me feel absolutely different and out of place. You know, my shoes, they will only were able to afford like one pair of shoes per year. And so by the time that like November came around, like towards the end of the year, my shoes had holes everywhere, you know, because you're a kid and you destroy everything. And everybody else was like super polished. Or they never celebrated my birthdays with parties, but I will go to my teammates houses and they had like pools and backyards and like this, you know, entertainment and like cakes and all these things that I just never really been exposed to. And so um that's sort of like the educational part. But then at home, and this is where, you know, maybe it gets a little bit more heavy. um I don't remember my parents ever loving each other, and I think that that's,
You mean like showing signs of affection,
yeah, I think like by the time,
even like verbally?
right. So my sister is 7 years older, and she saw them in love and she saw them happy and she saw them, and it's like she has these memories of them, like, you know, being a couple that
She's
loved each other.
older?
7 years older, yeah.
Okay.
And by the time I started having memories of them, I always remember them screaming at each other. And so that's one element. The other element is like I believe my mother is bipolar, and I don't think she, I mean, she has not been diagnosed as such, but I do remember her behaviors were too extreme. And
Well, even the sheer, I don't remember whether we talked about it on the podcast or whether it was a personal conversation, but like the reason you got kicked out of your house in the end.
yes, uh, yeah, I think like it, yeah, the switching from being in a good mood to being completely altered, you know, out of control, violent, could happen within 2 seconds,
Yeah.
and you would never know the trigger.
Yeah.
And so, so I think like my dad experienced that with her, right? And I do remember she had a bunch of pills, Valiums, if I remember correctly, in the house, and she will like take the volumes after, like she will have these attacks, and then she will like sleep for like 2 days, you know, and then she will wake up and she will be soft for like a little bit, and then it will snap again. And it was very not consistent. And so for my dad, he had to live through all of that. And I think like by the time that he realized, okay, this is not normal, this is not okay, they had two kids, you know, that were dependent on them. And so for a long time, I think that they didn't want to get divorced, even though the love have been gone for quite some time because of us. And so they consistently said, I remember my mom, you know, I remember my sister and I, you know, me being kid, like being like, just get divorced, just get divorced. Like, if you guys are not happy, because it was really painful, especially for me as a child, to see them, you know, scream at each other. Like, they were not the kind of people that will go into a room and kind of sort of keep it separate. No, it was full on blown out. Like, the neighbors will hear the screaming, the neighbor will come and grab me out of the house, so like I will not have to be exposed to that, but like I could hear the screaming happening, plates flying, you know,
Yeah.
like. And so, and again, I didn't know that none of this was normal, I because it's the only thing I knew growing up.
Yeah.
And so uh things advanced, and then eventually my dad left, and I think I was around 9. So when I was getting to the psychiatrist in the school because I was playing with the dolls, my dad was also leaving the house just because uh he couldn't deal with it anymore. And I understand now as an adult, you know. He was a very hard worker, and he will come from work and um my mom will have these stories that she made up in her head about like my dad cheating on her. Like she, there was no way for her to know any of these things. You know, it was
Well, the
just things,
paranoia, I think, is
the
a common
paranoia,
symptom of bipolar disorder.
absolutely paranoid. She will create all the stories out of like, oh, I found like I can smell perfume. And he was a for a while he was a taxi driver. You know? So like there were things that it's just like, but he will walk through the door and she already had the stories, and I'm like, how? Like
Yeah,
this is not like he was posting. Like there was no cell phones. There was nothing at this time. You know, like it's not anything that could potentially have been based in reality. So she had all this crazy paranoia, the stories. And I think my dad eventually got tired of telling her, like, this is not happening, you know, and
yeah,
her just blowing up. And so eventually they did divorced and he left. And he also couldn't make enough to survive himself and also pay for us. And so my sister started working, but then I think what happened is, so I was 9, 10 around the time, and my mom just shifted all of that anger that she had towards my dad towards me.
yeah.
And so she wanted me to
It's got to
go,
go somewhere.
yeah. And so she wanted me to go to work at 10. I was terrified because I couldn't even figure out, you know, like how to dress myself at that age, you know? And it's just the idea of going to work, like not even understanding the dynamics of adult life, you know. So that was one of the biggest things. I was absolutely terrified of that. I was absolutely consistently in fear because she will be fine 1 second, and then the next second she will imagine that I ate the chocolate in the fridge, and then suddenly she's slapping me, and I have no concept or idea of why that will happen. Or she will accuse me of things that I didn't do, which is also like very traumatizing to me. And these were violent attacks. Like it was not just, oh, I'm gonna slap you and I send you to a room. This was like several slaps in a row to the point that I had to like cover myself or like move away, you know. And this, you know, I was still a child at the time. And as I was growing a little bit bigger towards like 14, 15, that's when I kind of sort of started like just covering myself and protecting myself and just almost defying her a lot more. And I became stronger and more like just, yeah, defiant over to all of this violence. Um, so that was one aspect. And then the other aspect was that she had no friends, obviously. She burned through all of her friendships because she had this thing that was like, oh, I always will tell people, um, you know, the truth, you know, but the truth was her opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about like like how you said that how she used to talk about your
My
body and
body,
stuff. I
yeah.
imagine she was probably doing that with anybody who she would have come
Yeah, and
across.
so that's kind of sort of was the end of our relationship now as an adult. But yeah, like the truth for her, loving someone meant giving her opinion, regardless of whether it was an objective truth or not, or if it was going to hurt someone or not. And so she was never able to develop friendships, not even within her neighbors. Like her neighbors didn't want to talk to her. She was, you know, like she was left alone. Um, she didn't want to redate anybody else. My dad eventually found, you know, his first girlfriend, and they're in love now. And I'm happy to say that I did get to see like what a model relationship based on love is like, um because I saw my dad with his soulmate, you know, and that was actually quite healing for me to be able to see that. um but also my mom, by not having any of these friends, what ended up happening is that she will tell us all of her emotional turmoil to us.
Because yeah, she didn't have anywhere else to
Right. And so this 10 and the 17-year-old
carrying these like crazy
kids,
emotional
my
burdens.
sister working to
Yeah.
sustain us as retail, also going to high school, and myself, you know, 10-year-old that wanted to play video games, you know, having to do chores around the house because she will go into Valium attacks that will like last like a couple days. And then on top of that, having to emotionally regulate her. We never learned our own emotional regulation tools, and we also essentially had to mature very quickly and start taking care of her emotions. So there was a lot of things that I wouldn't tell her, because I was afraid, first of all, that she will react in the most random, out of control way, but also because we didn't want to upset her, and so that was a lot of growth that we both had to do very early on. Um, and all of this for me personally, and I'll stop talking for a little bit. We can hear your story, um, but all to say that like I didn't know that this was not normal,
Yeah.
and I'll explain how I got to. Do we want to do a switch here and then like share a little bit more of you and
Well, I
like
was
how I got to therapy?
Well, I wanted to comment on like how you were talking about like how you don't really remember like your and your sister's perspectives on your parents' relationships like prior to
Yeah.
like them actually splitting were so different. Um I can't speak to whether I can't think of what my sister's opinion or perspective is, but um, mine is kind of similar. Like I don't remember my mom and dad being like mean or anything like that to each other, but I don't remember like clocking lots of like signs of affection being given back and forth. Like like kissing, sure, but like my family, or like all growing up, my family, and maybe this is weird for other people, this is very normal for us, but like we kiss each other on the lips. Like I kiss my mom on the lips, I kiss
Mm,
my sister on the lips, like
mhm.
when we say we love, good, hello, goodbye, like instead of like the cheek kiss or whatever. So but I don't really ever remember it being like much more than that. So I can relate to this like not, well, I mean, regardless, it would have been like a heterosexual relationship, so it would have been like not the most
Mhm.
easily to identify with,
Yeah.
but there was definitely like yeah, like a lack of growing up with like a necessarily what like a good model. Because again, like I don't think that there was necessarily any like clocking of lots of like bad behaviors, but there wasn't like a lot of uh,
Affection.
affection being
Yeah.
expressed towards each other. So I
Yeah.
definitely, and like I see that in myself as an adult, like in especially in like public spaces, like
Mhm.
occasionally, like if the mood hits me, then like yeah, like let's make out in the middle of the bar that we're at or something like that.
Right.
But like it's very not first nature for me to like be very affectionate with a person.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I am a very affectionate person with my partners. I'm not very affectionate with a lot of my friends until like way later. Like it has to be a year or two of like just being really close to friends to me to start relaxing into being more physical.
Physical affections particularly is something that like I yeah
Yeah,
don't express a lot of.
but it's really interesting because with my partners, I am very affectionate physically. Um, and uh, my mother, she was a physical too and affectionate, but it was such a like black and white.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, there's
Okay.
physical affection, but there's also physical violence.
Right.
So
And
it's like,
so I think like, one of the revelations I had is like it was just really disconcerting. And for a long time, and this kind of is gonna get into how I got to therapy, I guess. Uh, but all of my partners throughout my 20s and my 30s prior to therapy, and just for context, I've been in therapy for 7 years now. Um, in case there is any prospect of dating, I'm not that crazy anymore.
we're working on it.
We're working on it.
7 years of experience working on it. So
No, but
because
prior,
you're definitely way deeper into your like adult therapy journey than I am. I feel like I'm just really
yeah,
getting started.
yeah. So, um, my biggest regret, and if I had to do a PSA right now, it's like get to therapy as soon as possible.
Even
My
if you don't think that there's something going on,
Just do it. If
yeah.
you're gay and you had a childhood, if you're not gay and you had a
If you didn't
childhood,
just show up at 30,
just go to therapy just for the sake of society. Imagine everything that is happening politically right now.
if they all
If
just went to
they all
therapy.
fucking went to therapy, I swear to you guys. Um, but so what ended up happening is that all through my 20s, all through my 30s, I was able to tolerate such bullshit. And I had such a broken compass of what love was, because love to me was presented as this very violent, very hot and cold reality. And so, as long as someone was treating me slightly better than my mother, I would think that that was a good thing, that that was a good person. But the bar was like so low. It was buried under the ground, like that's how low it was. And so for many, many, many years, I dated very toxic people. None of them were physically violent, although there was some sexual abuse, but they were more of like just risky, hookups that you do in your 20s. It wasn't necessarily someone that I was actually dating long term. But for people that I have dated long term, there was an underlying pattern of verbal abuse. The last guy that I actually dated in Texas, um, what this person did to me, specifically to my self-esteem, which was like literally destroy any resemblance that I had left, from growing up with a mother that would just criticize my body consistently if it was too thin, too thought too high, which you were just sharing earlier, too thin, too fat, too muscular. She always had something to say about my body, and again, it was like this opinions, because I love you, I'm gonna give you this opinion that I have. But the opinions were consistently being moved, like the goalpost of what was the ideal state never came. And it took years to figure out, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm thin or fat, or
There's
like
always going to be
she will
something.
always going to have something to criticize me for. And so it became this hamster wheel, right? And so all of these people that I dated, this last guy was being really abusive, verbally saying things like, I will never date you. I like you, but like you're disgusting physically, you're not muscular enough. And when I will pull away or feel hurt about that, he would just come and seek me out. And then we would just go into this very toxic push and pull, very inconsistent. And then the moment that we actually got intimate was because my ex-boyfriend was in town and we were all hanging out together, and he took it as a challenge to show my ex-boyfriend, who was also dating someone else at the time, to show him that he had won me over, that he was better than my ex because he had control over me. And so there was this crazy thing where like I'm like, finally this guy is recognizing me, or in my head thinking that this guy finally sees me, and he's like buying me drinks this night and like just being obsessive with me and kissing me in front of my ex. But it was all a show. It wasn't real.
It was him stroking his own ego.
Yeah, and so at some point I think it got so intense. I wasn't even aware, and I apologize to my ex because he has a heart of gold. But he saw all of this, and like I think eventually it got to him, and he was like he left the
Yeah.
place. um and at that point we were like super drunk with this guy. In my eyes, I'm just illusioned. It's like, oh my god, he finally sees me, it's gonna happen
Yeah. This is what I've
tonight.
been waiting
This
for.
is what I've been waiting for. And he's like, let's go to my place. And I was like, oh my god, yes, like I've known you now for like 2 3 months. I'm finally going to his place. And we get to his place, and he's like, we should fuck tonight because if I sober up, I don't think I will ever sleep with you. And it just hit me
Oh
like
my
I
God.
think like I
It's
started.
just insane to me that somebody like people how do you not hear yourself? Like it's
To be fair, I remember him saying a month prior that he was fucked up and that I shouldn't fall for him. Like when I actually expressed my feelings for him, he's like, don't fall in love with me, I'm fucked up. So he did warn me. But to me is, like I didn't heed the warning, and I also just uh again, I have such high tolerance for bullshit, for people criticizing me, for people like treating me like shit. This guy bought me drinks, like this guy, like this was already better. Like he paid some attention to me. And so we did not have sex that night. Luckily, I did have some vestige of like self-esteem left, that I
was it
was.
like that comment that like flipped
Yeah,
the
the
switch
the
for
comment
you?
flipped the switch for me. Like I was so shocked I internalized it. I did believed what he said, and I was like, uh, I agree with you internally. I agree with him, and I accepted that I was a disgusting, human with like an ugly body, and essentially was so shocked by that realization that I couldn't
Yeah.
actually move forward with it.
Yeah.
It's upsetting that it wasn't because of what he said, but in terms
But
that
it was because you believed what he
I
said.
agree with him. I was like, oh no, now I'm self conscious and I don't want to get naked
Yeah.
with you because I hear
I don't
you.
want to be vulnerable with you. Yeah.
Right. And so I left that morning. He was still sleeping, and he called me the next day like nothing happened.
He probably didn't remember.
Yeah, I don't think he processed any of that. I don't think I processed any of that. I think in my head it was just like, oh no, he's right. And him texting me is already such a gesture, that he, is able to put up with this disgusting human, right? And so I um I remember that he was going on a trip somewhere to a different city, driving for work. And somehow through this trip, he's texting me every hour and telling me like, how he wants to see me when he comes back, and that he really wants to like, kiss me and like be close to me and cuddle me. And this was new, like this was absolutely new because it was a shift from where we were. And so I was like, oh, okay, so maybe something did change that night.
Was this the first time you'd ever like stayed at his place? Like,
Yes, that
yeah.
was the
Okay.
first part.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so I don't remember how we met. I just remember we used to practice yoga together, which to me at the time I was a yogi, and that was really meaningful to me. And we will hang out all the time, and his girlfriend was with us most of the times too. And so eventually we just, for me, it was like, oh, someone that has my same interest. I never at that time met, another gay that was into yoga. And so, and he was really healthy in terms of food and intake and all this. And so we had some things in common. I don't think we had a lot more than that in common. But I was like 28, I will say. It's almost 20 years ago now. I'm being generous there, but I'm not 48, I'm 42. And so, anyhow, um, fast forward. Yes. So he's on this trip, and uh on his way back, finally, I think he was gone for like 5 days, and he was coming back, and it was late at night, and I'm literally like tidying up the house, because he's like less than an hour away. He's passing through the city, San Marcos, and I was living in Austin. um and so I'm tidying the house. He's gonna come over, we're gonna cuddle, like we're gonna do all the things that he's been telling me through this 5 days on this long ass trip,
Yeah.
that he wants to do with me. Uh, and as he's passing San Marcos, he says, actually, I think I'm gonna spend the night here in San Marcos because there's this really hot boy that I've been talking to that I really want to see. And it just got quiet, and like my heart, I sort of you, it broke in like 10,000 pieces. And he said, "Do you want me to show you a photo of him?" And I said, no, I don't want you to show me a photo, because I knew that if he showed me that photo and if this guy was like good looking, I was gonna be trashed.
Well,
And
I'm sure that that's why he wanted to show you a
right.
photo.
Yeah.
Because
And
he wanted to be like, this is what you should look like. Or,
yeah. And so I told him that it's like, don't show it to me because, like that's gonna break my heart. And he sent it to me.
yeah, of course.
Of course he sent it to me, and it was this beautiful, like muscular man, Latino. I remember the photo more than I remember the face of this guy, to be
I
honest.
mean, that's not that really doesn't surprise me,
Yeah, and
actually.
it's just it traumatized me, and that was the like, because I told him, it's like, if you send me this photo, I will never talk to you again. I warned him, and he sent it right after. And he's like, look how gorgeous he is, and I stopped replying, and he started threatening me.
Yeah,
He started going to
of
like,
course.
if you don't talk to me again, like I will never like he tried to shift the dynamic now for him to be in control. He's like, if
Well,
I,
that's what the whole thing is. Yeah,
yeah.
it's just a control power play.
And so I kept my word. I think eventually I did block him, but like for a while I just was getting, for the next 2 days, it was like a rampage of threatening messages. They will go from like really sweet things to like really mean things to like, you must answer me now. If you don't answer me now, you'll never hear from me anymore. And I think eventually I just blocked him. But that night after the photo, I remember blanking out almost of just the pain, and like I don't even remember how this happened. And up until that point, I never considered myself a violent person or an angry person. And I went to my living room where I had like this architect's desk. I was in college at the time, and um, had like my computer and all these drawings and things that I was doing for design um, stuff, and I just threw everything out of the things, and I started screaming like completely out of control and out of myself. And it was, I don't even know how long that process was, but like at some point, like I came back to myself and I was horrified. I was like, what is this? Where is all this anger coming from? Like I had no fucking clue that I was capable of such, like rage. And that's the key word. Um and this kind of directly ties on like my therapy thing. And so I think like a month or two later, I started dating again, and I went on a date with this one
I'm
guy.
honestly even impressed that it didn't take you longer.
It might have been longer. My time frames forever. Whenever I say anything about any time frames, I have no fucking clue. I lived so many
Okay,
lifetimes and put
heard,
it to
noted.
so
Take it
like
all with a grain of salt.
yeah, it's might have been longer, probably 5 months, whatever. At some point, I started dating again,
Okay, there we go. There we go.
and and I remember going on this date, and as soon as I saw the guy, I was like, oh no, this is not gonna do it for me. So it wasn't how the other guy obviously interpreted things. So he's like, oh, so how's dating been? And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna scare the fuck out of this guy by telling him the story because I have no desire to actually pursue this. And so like it was a way for me to also vent, but also
Let
you
me
have
trauma dump to get you to
yeah,
go
let me
away.
oh my
I'm about to
god.
like literally put it's like a I'm having a like a when like the prank that kids do where they put the like burning pile of shit on your front porch and you
Yeah.
step in it.
So you
That's
said
what
it.
you did.
It's like you obviously don't want to like look at what I'm gonna tell you. You probably want to stay away from this.
Yeah, look at what I got in here.
Yeah. Since you asked, let me show you how ugly it gets. Yeah. So I tell him the whole story, and his reply is, uh, "Oh, you sound just like the book that I'm reading." And I got so offended that he could.
Was it the Velvet Rage?
It was the Velvet Rage. It was the Velvet Rage, and I just was so offended that he thought that my unique life could be potentially be described in the book.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever a good I will say that I don't think it's ever a good idea to try to like because to me, him saying it's a little bit like invalidating doesn't feel like the right word, but that's kind of what that is. It's like trying to like package me up and
Yeah, he put me in a bag,
yeah.
but okay, so the date ended probably shortly after he told me the name of the book. He tried to grab my butt on the way out and kiss me. So it didn't work to scare him off. But I left, and I think there was one more guy that I tried dating afterwards. And this was really funny because we were like inseparable for like a month, and we were doing all these things together, and I thought he was into me. But no, he just wanted to be friends. And one day, like I'm like, we're sitting on the couch, we're watching a movie, we're kind of cuddling or touching each other, but not cuddling. And suddenly I try to like, get close to him. He literally pushed me away with his hand. And I was like, oh, okay. and we'd never talk about anything.
You mean like during the month of you guys hanging out, or you didn't talk about
No,
that?
and in that moment, and like that moment. So like imagine like you're hanging out with someone
I
that you think that there is like some energy, and like you're going for like a little bit more closeness,
I have a yeah.
and then they push you away, but they don't acknowledge. It's like, oh hey, you know, I don't feel that. Like there was nothing said. And I was just like, I was shocked, but I also didn't have the emotional maturity to bring it up at the
Yeah,
time or
that's
have
how.
the words or like
Well, good, yeah, because
even
you're like,
address
oh,
it.
whatever happens, it's gonna hurt more.
And so like I again like I
Yeah.
internalized all of that, and then I kind of like didn't address it, and then I think we stopped hanging out, and then he eventually found a boyfriend. But after that experience, I decided to buy the book. I was like, what do I have to lose? And I started reading the Velvet Rage, and I think like I read a page or two, and I crawled into a ball and I started crying because it
That
described me
quick.
to the fucking letter, every single experience. And so I was like obsessed with this book. I read it, and then at the end of it, I started thinking, for the listeners, by the way, that don't know what this book is about.
Did
uh,
we talk about it a little bit in the last episode?
did we? Maybe.
We probably
Oh
did
yeah, yeah,
because you
yeah,
talked.
yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how
We
much
did.
we talked about, so maybe you can refresh on the book. But yeah,
Yeah,
but we did because we talked about you
we did.
outing the guy by giving him the book. So
Yeah, we did. We did talk about it. So it's essentially a psychiatrist that describe a lot of the gay patients, and he creates archetypes of gay men essentially. And so there's multiple different ones. There's the one in the closet. There's the
yeah, I don't remember.
overachiever.
I don't remember any of the archetypes. I don't remember the book super well. I do remember I read it. I remember I didn't feel very connected to it, so that's why
Yeah,
I was like,
I think like it's for some people it's a miss. But for me it was very much spot on. I was already into self-help books, but this was the first self-help book that was oriented to gay men that like gay men. And I feel like I always had to extrapolate a little bit. It's like, oh, this is for like straight couples, or like this is how it works with straight couples. And so, he describes the development of the gay psyche, and like, when you take into consideration an absent father, a crazy mother, all these things, and then the archetype is this overachiever, sort of like impossible standards, completely low self-esteem, where all of your worth is attached to your achievements. uh to me it was like it was a map. It was like suddenly it was a map. And the writer is a psychiatrist, and so that's when I actually started thinking about going to therapy. And I'm gonna pause here. So we'll let you talk a little bit about your experience, and then we can probably share how we got to therapy.
like share my experience about how I got.
Yeah, just I mean the rest of your story since childhood is.
I mean, I would say that that kind of like was my childhood experience with therapy. Like it was very, I mean, I think that if I like there was the group therapy, there was the one-on-one counseling. I don't really have much memory beyond that. Like I imagine that any conversations I was having, I mean, I went there under the because my parents wanted me to my parents I guess wanted me to have some like an adult to talk to about like my sexuality to confirm that that was like
So this
not
is after the group.
during. I mean, I was doing both
Okay.
simultaneously. Yeah, but it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be on the same day. Like days where I would go to group would be a different day from when I would go to do one-on-one.
Do you feel like you have any insights or any like revelations that you had through either of those two experiences?
I think that it at an early age really helped me to like flex the like introspection muscles. Like I mean, I think as gay men we're forced to do that as gay people, queer people. I think that we're all kind of forced to do that at a much younger age than heterosexual people are, heterosexual or cisgendered people are. So but I think that I was given a unique opportunity to like not only like be forced to introspect, but like get to like practice introspection with a full grown adult to like
Mm,
bounce ideas off of. Um, so, I mean, if anything, I would just say that I really think it helped me because I was so confident in high school. I remember, like,
mm,
I was just talking with my therapist about this the other day. I remember walking away from senior year of high school, like, with a little bit of like a sense of like hubris. And like, I don't love saying this, but like, I definitely, there was a sense of like a feeling of superiority to like my classmates. I remember thinking, like, okay, here's in my class of like 700 people almost 650 of you were born and raised here and are going to Westchester University, which is 20 minutes away, and then after you or graduate there you'll buy a house in the general 5 mile area radius and have kids and then
mm,
just live your
and
entire
be
life
dead.
and die here. So I was like, okay, so I was like, I don't care about what these people think about me because I don't value their opinions, so let
Right.
them say whatever they want to say.
That sounds really healthy.
It was amazingly healthy.
Yeah.
I had a very it's funny because I mean, doing like a big jump forward. I mean, like I my journey getting back into therapy as an adult was largely related to like the breakdown of my self-esteem and my confidence in relation to some other context and issues. And like in having this conversation just the other day with my therapist, um, was like I feel like I'm almost doing like I don't know. It's like regardless, I'm like tapping into my high school self and like my high school persona of myself to like reinstitute confidence and self-esteem with myself. I just think it's like silly and weird, but maybe it's normal. I don't know. It just feels silly to like be like I want to feel more self-esteem, so I'm going to remember what it was like to be a kid again cuz like that's
I mean, that is the whole purpose of therapy is
yeah,
to
so
bring.
it just feels weird to think about like it's like okay, in order to feel better and feel happier, I need to feel like less of an adult. I need to like simplify.
Well, I think there's two concepts here that I think that are fascinating. One of them being that when we're younger, we know everything because we know so little that we think that we know so much because everything that we learn makes us feel like we know so much more. And so there is that level of like stupid youth, confidence.
Cockiness.
Yeah, that cockiness that you see it usually in like your 20s. But then there's also the other concept that a lot of us, especially gay men, we were traumatized very early on for whatever reason. It's either parents or it's either coming the
Bullying or
bullying and like having a heartbreak because you fell in love with your
the
straight
only
friend.
person that you
Yeah.
ever thought you would yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like so all of this like scars that a lot of us share are also the moments where like your brain sort of splits and it's like, oh, now we need to protect this, and so we're gonna kind of split from here, and we're just gonna create this like alternative persona. And I think a lot of the work in therapy is actually fetching all these little bits that you have protected and broken throughout your years and bring them back and essentially heal them and nurturing them and like give them what they couldn't be given or what you couldn't have given them in those moments. And I think it's such a powerful like healing journey to do that, and it's really painful. And we were just talking about with this with another friend, my other Ryan friend, about how, you know, even with myself, there were moments where like triggers will happen, especially in dating, and I will become a child. Like I will lose my ability to communicate properly, knowing very well that I can communicate as a very eloquent person, that I have a very demanding, difficult job, that I am very capable, and there will be this minor inconveniences around dating or around like that trauma that I couldn't deal with, that I will absolutely shut down, will feel like I was like a 4-year old 5-year old without the tools of an adult, and I could physically feel myself being a child. And now with a lot more of those pieces healed, I notice it in other gay men when they revert. And I was like, oh, right now you're not the adult that I know. You are operating from a trauma reaction place, and you're a child and you're acting up, and you need to go to therapy because I don't want to deal with this shit. That's ultimately the answer. But I think that what you're saying is actually very real, and I think that there's a lot of power into going into that space. So props for you and your confident self.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that I likely won't be able to work with this therapist anymore
Why?
because he has been well, he was our me and Josh's couples therapist.
Oh,
And um my partner went back into a rehab facility at the beginning of the month, and is going to actually move into a sober living house for a little while, which I'm really proud of him for
that's
doing.
great.
It's a really,
Yeah.
I'm really proud of him. Think he was gonna, I didn't think he was gonna get there. Um, but we started with him. I don't think that we're going to be able to. I doubt that Josh will have the time
Yeah.
or like privacy really to be able to engage in like couples therapy. He's going to be doing so much addiction therapy stuff,
Right.
and it's I guess a little frowned upon in the psychology community to
To
go
share.
to yeah to go from in either direction to either go from it sounded like it was the biggest no to be like a one-on-one counselor and then transition into a couples counselor, but it also seems like it's kind of taboo-y to do the opposite thing where you would be a couples and then go
Yeah.
down to a single.
Yeah.
But also,
There's a conflict of interest for sure.
well, because I mean when Josh is ready and there is space for us to get back in that room together, I want it to be this therapist. So it's like I like him so much. I think that me and Josh together can benefit from him so much that I would rather. So it's like I'm okay with it. It sucks because he's great and I would love to have him be like my trauma therapist,
Mhm.
but it's like it's more important for me that he's accessible and available to us when we're ready to continue again, because already we need such a unicorn being in California and Pennsylvania, so we need somebody who's
Oh, he's
licensed.
certified
They
both.
have to be licensed in
Right.
both to be able to take care of us. So it's like
Right.
it sucks because I really like him, and now I have to go through. This will be I'm now me trying to find the third therapist in the
Right.
last year, which everybody, that's part of the journey.
Oh my God. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah,
Because
because it's a very important
I,
thing to just like accept that that's going to be part of it, and then if you don't like your first therapist, don't give up.
yeah, I hear this a lot, when I recommend my friends to go to therapy. I was like, "Oh, I already tried therapy and like I didn't like it." And I was like,
You just didn't
"Okay,
like the
you
person.
didn't like one therapist." Like
They're not all the same.
yeah, it's not one the same. Also, you going to therapy is like going to the gym, guys, or like brushing your teeth.
Going to the
You
restaurant, like
cannot do it once or twice or even a week and expect results. Like this is a
fair.
long-term situation. So, but you gotta find the right therapist.
Yeah.
You have to find the therapist. For me, what works is like he has to be a male, he has to be gay, and he
I'm
has
gonna
to be non-white.
I'm gonna try being a little bit more picky this time around. I'm taking a page out of your book and was like, yeah, let me, because in the past I've just been very much like it doesn't really matter, like whatever, but like I want to give it a try of like being able to like have somebody who's a little bit closer to my age, who's a gay male.
Yeah,
Because I agree, I think that there's
big difference.
well, and I've had I guess both of my therapists that I remember as a child, I had a male and a female. And then my first therapist as an adult was a male, and then we had the female, and now back to male. So it's like I've done a little bit of both, but it would be nice to, yeah, I want to try at least shop around in that category and see
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah, and I think by the third session, for
I'll know
sure.
during the
I
first.
mean, sometimes it's the first, but sometimes like it takes me a little bit, like the first one you usually talk about like your goals, what brought you to therapy, a little bit of your past. So I feel like I talk a lot on the first session and I don't really get to feel that person a lot. And so I
Well, and
try to
also
give
since
them also as much context as possible to be like, can you deal with this? Or are you comfortable dealing with this? And so like it takes me like up to 2 or 3 to like just really feel like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be able to open up to this person fully, which is ultimately the place where you want to get to. It's like, will I be able to share with no filters every single one of my weaknesses, my pains, my sorrows, my joys, my happiness, obviously, too. But, like, can I go that deep and can I be that vulnerable? And in some ways, with some people, because they're also a stranger, I put so much more weight into the things that I share and things that I openly will never maybe discuss with a friend, not because I don't have that trust with a friend, but it's because there are thoughts that are like just
Right.
really out there, that I know that if I share this with someone, like, even if I'm contemplating or trying to get the idea out as I'm saying it, like, I'm like, this is a lot of weight to put in a friend. And there's this other misconception, I think, that um a lot of people is like, oh, I have a best friend, I can tell them anything. And I'm like, it's not about that. It's about sharing the depths of you, but also having someone on the other side that know what to do with that. And our friends, they are lovely. They are there to support us. They're there to, like,
They're
to
not professionally trained to deal with our emotional
right.
baggage.
And so, and this is the deal, is like a good CBT therapist, and we can talk about different modalities too, but CBT, not the drugs, but the cognitive behavioral therapy, um, they are able to slowly inch your bad mental patterns of, like, self-deprecation or pain or suffering, inch by inch, move them so that your brain can start firing neurons differently, so that you don't get caught into this negative patterns of behavior. And this is key because, one of the things that I discover about myself is, like, sometimes I go into body dysmorphia and self-deprecation, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm like, oh my god, I'm horrible and awful. And you all now know you know what my context is to feeling that way. And if I tell this to a friend, what my friend is going to say is like,
You look
you're
great.
ridiculous, you look great, you look amazing. And one key thing that is happening in that moment when I'm triggered is that my brain
Won't accept that.
cannot
You're just
bridge
gonna
where I
frustrate
am
you.
at and how I'm feeling to what my friend is seeing in that moment, which is probably closest to more of an objective truth. But my brain in that moment cannot see an objective truth. So what a therapist will do is, like, they will inch us, like, okay, well, is there something about yourself that you love and like it, and they kind of work with you to try to find what is the next best thought that you can consciously agree to, that moves the needle slowly to a better place. And again, this is not something that you do overnight. This is, work that takes a long time to inch you from one thing to the other. And one key um, insight that I had after, like, I think, like, 3 or 4 years of therapy. One day I was like on the streets, and instead of hearing my mother's voice criticizing me, I started hearing my therapist. And it was like in that moment
What a powerful moment.
that I knew that it actually worked, because it
Yeah.
was my therapist had replaced some of the most toxic thoughts that were like planted in my subconscious, and yeah.
We can take breaks.
Yeah.
We need to take little breaks. I definitely think that this is the episode for that.
um and these are tears of joy, by the way.
Yeah.
they're, just- they're like they're
Here's a
yeah,
revelation, proudness of yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 um but yeah, it's crazy because I actually, they do say, like, ignorance is bliss, and I think, like, for a long time, um I didn't know that I was traumatized. I didn't know that my upbringing wasn't normal. um So to recap from where we were, read the book, moved to California. I decided to start anew, and I decided to. Oh,
Wow.
we can hear the bus.
There's no way that anybody on the podcast is going to hear what just happened, but like we said earlier, so we can pick up everything. And a bus just went by outside. We're like 5 stories up, and we both heard it like we were at the bus stop. It's really interesting how much these things pick up.
So, uh, anyhow, so I decided to like start a life anew in San Francisco, and one of those key things is that my new job was giving me. I think at the time it was like 52 sessions of therapy. So like
All
literally
that you could
one
need for
per
a
week.
year. Yeah.
Yes, it was one per week. Um, has since other companies have never given me this much therapy for
That's
free,
nice.
but 52 sessions per year, and so obviously I started looking for therapists. The first therapist I had was hilarious, talking about finding the right therapist. He was this old man, he was gay, he had like this very um
Did you say his name was Hillary?
no, 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 no. What did I say?
You said Hillary.
He was really old.
But you said what's their
I
name?
don't know.
Oh, okay.
He
I
said
swore you said that Hillary was your first therapist,
no, no,
and
no,
then
no.
you started saying he, and I was like, "There's a male named Hillary?
I'm
That'd be
pretty
a
sure there
first."
was an accent situation. Uh, so anyhow, he was very old, and he had like a very smelly, stuffy office in like a really old building in Market.
Oh God, the days when you got to do therapy in person.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This was pre-pandemic. It was like
Yeah,
literally 7, 8 years
yeah. Who
ago.
knows if that'll ever happen again?
Yeah, and so I remember going and like on the third session, he fell asleep. I'm talking about like my my issues with self-esteem, like how I don't matter.
Did you slip out while he was still sleeping? I would have slipped out while he was still asleep.
He fell asleep. He fell asleep on my session. And then he woke up and he asked me a question of something that I have said like 20 minutes prior. And I was like, okay. And so
Is that how you realized that he had fallen asleep? Like
yeah, like I wasn't paying. I thought he just closed his eyes for like deep
he's like he's
hearing.
like he's like let me
Let me close my eyes and
so I
really
can.
put myself in your place. No, he was completely knocked out. He was knocked out.
That's
So
insane.
that was awful. And so I end up like obviously I canceled, and then they asked me why, and I explained this to like customer service or whatever. But and then I found this amazing therapist, and I think I recommended it to you at some point. He was the first therapist that like got me through the biggest pieces of insight, right? And I remember telling him my whole story, and again at the time I didn't know that my upbringing was different, and so he started calling my mother abusive and my father abusive and emotionally distant. And I just keep defending them. It's like, no, my mom wasn't that. Like, what are you talking about? Because in my head, abusive meant like, a lot more aggressive, violent, to a degree. My life was, but, and I had not made the connection yet, that I have experienced, something that a child should not have experienced. And so I keep defending my mom and saying like, well, but she gave me a place to sleep and she gave me food. And he was like, that's the legal
Minimum.
minimum to have a child. Like that is
Yeah, if
not
you didn't do that, she goes to jail.
right. Exactly. Like it was like they will be taken away from her. Like you will be being taken away from her. And so and I think like you kind of mentioned this, but I don't know if you told people, but I was kicked out at 15, not for being gay, but because I wasn't vacuuming properly. So that was kind of sort of the trigger
Properly is
with a smile.
with a smile.
Yeah.
That's I think important to know
Yeah.
what the thing that was done wrong there.
I wasn't smiling
Yeah,
because I wanted to play video games. I remember.
yeah, yeah.
I couldn't play video games. I had to vacuum, and
I
I
don't
was
know a
like,
single person who's not smiling ear to ear
with
when they're
force.
fucking vacuuming.
I mean, I do now when I sing around the house.
Yeah, now
I'm singing Defying
when you do it on
Gravity.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so anyhow, so very early on, I had to like fend for myself, and I was going to school by myself, and I was working an internship, um, and I was going to high school at night. But anyhow, point is, my therapist is just essentially telling me just things about my mom being abusive, and then my upbringing wasn't, and I was defending her. At some point, he's like, "Okay, doesn't seem like you really understand. Is this working for you?" Like he was like, literally, it's like it's like you're not hearing me, right? And oops, and so he said imagine all of your nephews and nieces. Would you treat them as an adult now? Would you treat them in the same way your mom treated you or your dad treated you? And my heart broke in a thousand pieces at that moment. I was like, it finally clicked because I understood by knowing how much I love my nephews and my nieces and my sibling, um, that I will never expose them to the violence that I was exposed to the emotional heaviness that I was exposed to, let alone imagining them getting kicked out at 15. Because, by this time, I think like two of them were around that age, and just thinking about them like living on their own seems impossible to me. Like I was like, how would you do that? Like, why would you even threaten a child with like kicking them out? Like
Yeah.
and I don't, you know I think about this, and obviously I think about my mother, and just all of the things that they had to overcome. you know uh this family from Italy, they escaped the war. Her dad died when she was 5. Her mom raised like 20 children. I don't know how there were like so many of them, Italian families. One of her siblings died of tuberculosis, young. Like, so we're talking about different world, where survival was key, and maybe food and a roof was actually more than the
The
bare
most that
minimum.
they could
Yeah,
provide.
yeah, and it was a lot,
Yeah.
and so obviously our gauging of what it is required or necessary to raise a child has changed, and we definitely want more and demand more and are able and capable of giving more, but it's not something that I could have expected them to know or have, especially where I grew up in. But yeah, I guess that's kind of the moment where like I had the revelation that, yeah, my upbringing wasn't, something that everybody went through.
I like your therapist's tool of like asking, okay, like think about like you're in the position of being a parent or an adult figure, and like, cuz I'm still kind of like having a hard time, because it's like, I mean, I've only really barely touched on this thing and haven't really had the opportunity to actually do therapy work. We've just kind of like diagnosed and acknowledged that there's this trauma in my
Mm-hmm.
past,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like thinking about the event, like it still like feels weird to label it as trauma. For me, it's like the way that I can more easily identify it as trauma is like looking at how it impacted me, and like the like snowball of effects that like inevitably made me like, I have to get to therapy, I have to work on this.
Mm.
But you saying that of like, would you ever do that to a person? Like immediately I was like, I would never
Right.
ever do that to anybody.
Right.
And so like that definitely is like I think something that I need to like really like look at myself right now. Is not the time to do it. But I think that's a helpful, like an extremely helpful.
Well, it's because it took me out of that traumatized child mentality, because, and this is something also that happened over the years, is the way that I've told my story, has changed radically. So in my 20s, when I was like a hippie, going to Burning Man and doing all this like crazy things, I remember talking about my childhood and making it so that it was so funny that everybody around me will laugh.
Yeah.
And so I was absolutely disassociated with like a completely warped story that I told. It
Mhm.
wasn't a lie, but it was not.
You had to put a spin on it to make
It
it.
was a spin, and that's how I would tell my story.
That's how you coped with it.
And then through therapy, right? And then through therapy, I started telling the story, but from the perspective of the child, like what the child was seeing, and there was also so many gaps to it, right? And then no, through therapy, sorry, through therapy was actually um more of like this adult person, like really describing the story of the child.
Mhm.
And then 3 or 4 years after therapy, I remember sitting here with a friend and telling the story again. But this time I was the child. And as I'm telling the story, I'm literally reliving everything through the eyes of the child and seeing these large figures, like hitting me and like all of the things that were happening, right? But as a child. And I literally started sobbing again, for like the 10th time, in my life that I had to relive these things, But that moment felt like a total breakthrough because I was finally like integrating all of the things into one when I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm not telling the story of that person that is, the play. I'm not telling the story of the child from a different perspective where I'm still separated from it and still protected from it. But finally, I was the child telling the story. And it was the most, like obviously the most vulnerable way that I've told that story, and I was in tears. I was like, I don't know why I'm crying. Like I
I've told this
processed it
story so
so
many
many
times.
times, but like I could feel that I was seeing it through those eyes, and that was like a huge breakthrough. And so, um, I don't know, just to wrap up all of my story, I guess, because we're kind of like at the present moment now. um, I would say that all of the triggers, like some of the things that I learned through therapy, I think like in terms of insights, right? How to learn to elevate my self-esteem. Like literally what took me to therapy was I seen this pattern of all of this abusive men that I dated. And at some point I had to stop and being like, okay, I don't think it's their fault anymore. It's not that they are the assholes, right? It's like, what am I doing? Because I'm the constant here. What am I doing that is creating this reality for me? Right. And until I did that, until I actually decided that I was responsible for what was happening in my life, regardless of the shit that I had to go through, you know, which I could potentially continuously blame my father and blame my mother and blame every single asshole that I dated, and continue to escape the truth of it, which is, well, I'm an adult now and I am the constant. And what the fuck am I going to do to change my reality? And until I did that and I took some steps, I was powerless. But therapy made me powerful. Therapy, taught me it's like, well, it's not that they're the assholes, it's that you are allowing them to treat you that way. You're allowing people to treat you in that way.
And
If
you're like, and there's an aspect to it. I mean, I guess I wonder because this is how it is for me. But there's also an aspect of like, so then you define yourself in that way, and like you can't, and like it's this like perpetual cycle of like, this is who I am, this is what I am, and
right,
so like you continue to be that.
right, and yeah, it's almost like you believe you deserve that treatment. You allow that treatment because you don't think bigger than yourself. Like you think, well, of course he's gonna treat me that way. I deserve that.
Yeah,
Like and I should take those crumbs and you know, cherish them, you know, because like, oh my God, they're like this couple grams, and you're
yeah,
allowing that bare minimum
yeah.
to be essentially your world. And until you decide to raise the prices, of what you have to offer, you're gonna continue being purchased for pennies. You're gonna be, in the offer on the offer rack at,
Yeah.
what is that?
Sale rack.
Yeah, the sell rack. And so you gotta raise your prices, and it has to be, you know, something that you build yourself for yourself. It's not like you can also use contempt or ego or projections. It's not like one day you can say like, "Oh, I am amazing." Like no, it has to be real for you. Like
Yeah.
it has to be like what is it that you're doing for yourself that is going to make you love yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think like everybody's like, "Oh, you cannot date someone until you love yourself." And I fucking hate that because I heard that for 20 years of my life and I'm like, I don't know how to love myself. I'm shit. Like how
I guess
like
I'll be single forever.
yeah, like what is your point
Fuck
here?
you.
Like it was like but just never landed because it's like, okay, well, you're not giving me any functional thing. Of course, from your mighty self-love throne, you can tell me to love myself, but I am not there. I am
Yeah.
down here feeling that I'm a piece of shit, and so how do you make that bridge? So with therapy, for one, because you have to move that needle from thinking that you're, who you are to something better, right? And it doesn't happen by forcing that thought through, but also by discovering yourself. And I think like um if you guys haven't read, we have a blog out where I actually talk a little bit about the things that work for me to build um, self-love, and that was, obviously the self-work, learning. That's another thing. Like every year, I decide to learn something new because I realize that if I'm learning something intellectually or a new hobby or something that just makes me invest in myself, it makes me feel deserving of
Yeah.
my love, and that works for me. Another thing that I think works for me and that I started, as doing more often now and almost solidify is just building community, and that is a staple now in my heart. Like hosting the board game nights. It's just like having people over, knowing that I can bring people together, and that I have a community of friends makes me feel worth it.
Yeah.
not
I just
because
felt
i'm not because I'm doing that, but because I feel the love, like, and I love loving them and honoring them with food and hosting them. Like that makes me feel good, but also it repels my tendency to self-isolate, especially self-isolate when I'm not feeling great, or when said Martin's a joy, guys.
mm,
But like when I'm not doing well at work because I still struggle with um my self-worth being tied to my accomplishments, which is an awful thing to do. Please don't do that, guys, because it's like when things go
seems pretty
well, you feel like
stereotypical for
you're
gay
on the top
men.
of the world, and when things don't go well, you feel like you're shit because you did not develop that self, reliance in yourself of of feeling worth it just because you exist, because you have a life, because you have a body, and you have, purpose. And if you don't do that and you attach it to your accomplishments, when things don't go wrong, which inevitably it will,
It will.
because it's a fucking roller coaster consistently, then your self-esteem suffers, and so I have this tendency to self-isolate when I'm stressed at work, or
Mm.
when I don't want to put weight on my friends, because I don't feel worthy, for them to like support me, which is so awful to think that. But I think a lot of gay men, we do this, right? Like
Oh yeah, like
we're like, if
you're
we're
you're
not
just
perfect,
narrating a page from my book right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
if we're not perfect, um, we don't want to show that to anybody. We don't want to show it to our partner. We don't want to show it to our friends. And it's such an awful thing because nobody's perfect. And if a friend tells me like, "Hey, I'm struggling," all I want to do is just support that person and just be there for them. And I want them to tell me, please do tell me, like, if you're not doing well, because I want to be there for you.
Yeah.
But when I flip that story on its
For
head,
yourself.
and when it's me that needs that, it is so hard to like,
Reach out.
reach out. And so, um, to all my friends that know that when I'm self-isolating, they start calling me. I love you so much. I know that you know me enough now, but Yeah, it's been a process to be able to get there. So the good things that I'm doing. So community, another one. Hobbies, learning. Doing things that you love. Going on walks, expressing my creativity. I think that those are all the things that build that self-love. And I think that that's the bridge for me, at least, that got me to understand what it is that about loving yourself.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to Live Laugh Loads. We want to try to keep episodes to about an hour and a half or so we're going to take a break here. Come take a load off with us next week and catch the next part of this episode.
You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube.
You guys can check us out on Instagram at LiveLaughLoads.podcast, on Bluesky at LiveLaughLoadsCast, or look us up at LiveLaughLoads.com.